The worst feeling is when you put a lot of work into something and you get some benefit, you get a win, and then in the long run, it ends up being a loss. We've all felt that before, and we've all heard that phrase the operation was successful, but the patient died. Sam Kyle calls this a Pyrrhic victory, and his book, Playing the Long Game, talks about the mindsets needed to overcome or to prevent having a Pyrrhic victory. And so in this video, I'm sharing 3 things I learned from Playing the Long Game by Sam Kyle. The first lesson is to skate to where the puck is going. That means not being caught up in the same place where everyone else is, but anticipating where the action is going to be. In order to do that, that requires vision. It requires being able to see a couple of steps ahead of everybody else. It requires patience to execute on that vision, and it also requires a strategy in order to get there. Now, when people play the short game, they're playing the same game as everybody else, and they're trying to get those same small wins as everybody else. But the problem when you focus on the short game is that there's a much higher cost of failure. So if you put all your eggs in the basket of what we can immediately get right now, if it doesn't work out, the stakes are much higher. But when you play the long game, if you're skating to where the puck is going, so to speak, a short-term setback isn't as catastrophic. When you play the long game, that cost of failure is much lower. The challenge, of course, is that playing the short game is a lot easier and there's more immediate satisfaction. Think about something like consuming information over social media versus sitting and reading a book. One has immediate gratification, but the other one we know is more useful and more beneficial in the long run. The primary challenge to skating where the puck is going is that if you've been playing the short game for a long time, changing requires a lot more effort. For example, if someone's been accustomed to eating junk food, then it's going to be much harder to eat healthy food. That healthy food is going to taste bland. It's not going to have all that extra salt and sugar, and so it's not going to be as satisfying when you eat it, even though you know in the long run it's much more important for you to have that. So the resistance to change is much stronger when you're playing that short game. The second lesson I learned is that consistency is the most important element of playing the long game. We've all heard all of the cliches. Eating an elephant starts with one bite. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Rome wasn't built in a day, and so on and so on and so on. And these cliches have a powerful element of truth. No matter what that long-term goal is, you have to chip away at it consistently. And when you consistently do something day after day, you start to build momentum. And one thing that Sam Kyle points out in the book is that momentum can be more powerful than even big wins in some cases, because a big win might give you a sense of satisfaction. You might take the pedal off the gas, but consistency that builds momentum keeps you going even on the slow days. And over time, over the months and years, there's a huge compounding effect that leads to disproportionate amount of results. Also, because we live in a society where speed has become such a premium, speed has become such a value. It used to be that patience was the ultimate virtue. And Kyle says in the book that now speed has overtaken patience as the ultimate virtue. So if we take that idea that you're probably familiar with, the zig when everyone else zags, you get a competitive advantage. Well, in a world where everyone is valuing speed, there's a competitive advantage to being patient and being consistent. The third lesson I learned is the idea of second order effects. Now, that's a fancy way of saying the consequences of your actions. So, for example, you know that if you buy something that you can't afford, you get a short-term win or a first order consequence, which is that you're able to buy something that you want to get. The second order consequence, or the consequence of the consequence, is that over time you may end up paying a lot more money in interest payments. So there's a lot of situations where there's a short-term benefit, but in the long run you have that Pyrrhic victory, right? You end up having a larger cost on the back end. That second order effect is negative. And so the key becomes, how do we avoid those second order effects? The first thing is to understand that first order effects and second order effects are often the opposite. So that means in order to play that long game and get the bigger payoffs at the end, it might mean that you have to do some more painful things in the short term. If we take that example of social media again, there's a first order consequence of engaging with content, connecting with people, consuming all this useful stuff. But there's a second order consequence that we sometimes don't think of when it comes to our ability to focus, problems with attention spans in the future, even issues with mental health. One thing that he mentioned in the book that I found to be particularly interesting was the idea that the person who is a superior thinker is the one that can best accurately predict the first order and second order consequences. So the one that's able to cast the best vision and understanding of the long-term effects of a certain business strategy, or of a certain plan, or of a certain project, or a certain course of action. The one that can best predict those second order consequences has the most superior mental model or way of looking at things and making sense of them, and adds the most value to a team or to an organization. And so by focusing on that second order effect, you prevent that Pyrrhic victory where it looks like you got a win, but it ends up being a loss. So hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's an example of a long-term win that you got that you were forced to maybe take a short-term loss? Please share that in the comments. See you in the next video.